Hello, everybody, and welcome to our regular SIG Usability meeting. Today we have Gaby Moreno, who's going to present on a breakdown of feedback on Kubernetes user experience that she found on Hacker News and do some light analysis on that. And then Josie's going to give a presentation on another usability topic. So Gaby, you want to kick it off?
Yes, that sounds good. Let me share my screen. Host disabled attendee screen sharing. They need permission.
The host did not intentionally do that.
Let's
see. I'm gonna just make you a co-host.
Permission to share screen requested.
Okay.
Cool, thank you. Desktop. Cool. So I put I think this Hacker News thread came out pretty close to the beginning of the year. I have January 24th on here. But I still feel like
2020, not 2019.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Good catch. That would have been very long ago. But yeah, so like it sounds like you know, it was a pretty it got a lot of comments. It was posted, let's see. It got about 250 comments. So I went ahead and read through, just kind of like skimmed through those. Someone mentioned that there was a previous Hacker News thread that had been posted before that had 315 comments. So it looks like, you know, there's good conversation going on about this in the community. In addition to the Hacker News comments was the article itself, which was which I also read. And I guess just to give a little bit of background on the article in case y'all haven't read it, is this kind of like smaller team that maintains a monitoring service. And so they have to be close to hardware. And so they're unable to use a managed Kubernetes instance in this example because of that restriction. So they were talking, they're coming from the experience of someone that uses that unmanaged version of Kubernetes and kind of like their experience managing their monitoring specific microservices across this kind of like small team. So that's just a little bit of background because I do feel like it's important, you know, that you don't have like the niceties of managed Kubernetes, like, and you have to do everything yourself, kind of like what that experience is like. So in the article, they talk a little bit about how deploying they need very, very basic things. Visibility into the services that they have running, which I think is the biggest one, and basically being able to easily deploy and just keep a pulse on them. And because Kubernetes offers so much, they brought up things like RBAC or concepts like config maps, or that they felt weren't as relevant to their use case, but that are very much like the encouraged best practice in Kubernetes as kind of like a good way to do things. And I think I get into this later, but basically it's really hard to discern what concepts to kind of like fully adopt, like config maps, for example, and whether they're like right for me. So that was kind of like the theme of the article. So I'm looking through these Hacker News comments, just some sentiments there to saying that Kubernetes makes easy things harder than they should be and harder things much easier than they usually would be. So an example of when Kubernetes is very awesome, Kubernetes at its best, is that with classical solutions, and actually you'll kind of see like my approach to this is very much kind of like when I was reading through these and kind of felt like some of them were saying the same thing, I tried to just, you know, pull out one that I felt was pretty representative of what a few of them were saying, just to pull up some themes. So that's why I said just like very lightweight analysis, just kind of trying to like keep, stay true to the raw content. But in this example, they're saying that classical solutions that someone would have to put together themselves today based on Puppet, Chef, Ansible, handwritten shell scripts, VMs, and SSH, that you can bring those up. You can do that, but with Kubernetes, all of this work has been done for you. And Kubernetes makes this super nice because you're only needing to deal with this at a high level primitive level, like at an abstraction level. And then Kubernetes takes care of the rest for you. So if you ran stuff the classical Unix way, you kind of see like how awesome Kubernetes is and how much it does for you. And you already have this idea of kind of like what you need to do and how much value like Kubernetes brings. So I highlighted this, all of these solutions require a lot more custom glue from an ops team than Kubernetes does. So that was one example. Sure, can Kubernetes be simpler? Yes, when you don't need a production system that has high availability. As soon as you need high availability, all of a sudden you need to be able to fail over, you need load balancing, you need backends for load balancing, and so Kubernetes makes that very easy. Is going from this jump to like distributed system. So very oriented towards production environments, and so I think that that's why a lot of people are kind of saying like, I want to set up a prototype, but Kubernetes is made for setting up production. So kind of like going in with different mindsets. Kubernetes helps standardize a lot of these things that people find in these production environments. So this person was saying, I can easily hop between different clusters, and then those clusters are running different apps and topologies and have a good sense of what's going on. When people are writing their own custom solutions, they reinvent the wheel, and in their opinion is far more confusing. So that was like the good stuff. A lot of people in the article, especially people that didn't have access to managed Kubernetes, were kind of saying that they don't want to pay the Kubernetes tax. So, you know, you have like the typical example of someone trying to do their personal infrastructure on Kubernetes. These very smart people, kind of like sysadmin type of person with a lot of background, but you have your home lighting daemon running on Kubernetes, and that goes down one day. You know, something like running a stateful service, which might be easy on a PaaS, for example, is not as easy to do in vanilla Kubernetes. Debugging, we've heard that before in a lot of KubeCons. How do you do that? My home light stopped working. I couldn't tell. It turns out that it was because Kubernetes certificates expired. You know, they probably hadn't updated that version of Kubernetes. You know, future versions actually solved that. And so they're kind of like stuck debugging on Stack Overflow. So kind of like the net to say, when I have to do serious volume and can afford someone to focus full time on Kubernetes, which I think in this case was unmanaged Kubernetes, you know, they'll dive into it again. So I think that that's a good example of a hobbyist, for example.
Have you seen that picture that went viral like 4 or 5 years ago, which was like a huge truck that had like a tiny little container on it, and it said "running my blog on Kubernetes"?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's kind of what this reminds me of.
Yeah. Let's see. So building a self-service platform on Kubernetes. You know, at work, we're trying to build an entire service platform on top of managed Kubernetes. And, you know, not everybody has a good experience. They didn't really go too deeply into why, but I feel like maybe this was a little bit more of a relevant use case. You know, you have a managed Kubernetes service and you're trying to build a platform on it. So maybe that use case is very different from like the blog on Kubernetes. So this is from the article, and it's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, where you go in with this prototype mindset, creating a prototype with Kubernetes, and they started realizing that they were adding more layers of logic that was tying into Kubernetes. This calls out config maps as the example that I mentioned before. Helm and configure optional features so you don't have to use them. This person was kind of going down the route of just, embedding their config into the Docker image, which, debatable, depending on your team, you may have different best practices for that. And config maps is a best practice option that you have if you want to take advantage of. But they were saying it's tempting to go down the full path and build abstractions on top of Kubernetes when you don't really know if you need them. So the other example was RBAC. So someone learned Kubernetes around VE 1.5, just before RBAC was enabled by default. They resisted upgrading past 1.6 for a good long while until VE 1.12 because they felt RBAC was a feature that they didn't need. And all the features after it appeared to be something else which they didn't need. So, I'm not as familiar with this specific example, but I think RBAC is also just considered like a good practice, like the best practice for production. And so I think there's this kind of like tension between someone that wants to like get started easily, that maybe is not in a production mindset, versus someone that is, and that is kind of expecting to see these things.
Yeah, it's like trading wheels versus, because I mean, I do think that the Kubernetes community hasn't really optimized for a super easy installation path. And that's kind of something that Valerie was talking about with her secure by default idea. Like, why, when we help you automatically provision a cluster, are we leaving it kind of open to the world and not really ready to go for a new user? And so, yeah, it's very true. Like, there are no training wheels. Like, you kind of have to already know what you're doing to successfully stand up a cluster if you're really going to use it. But on the other hand, when you're using a platform and you wait 6 versions to upgrade, like, yeah, you're going to be in a lot of pain. So
yeah, for sure. We had some very cool debugging use cases here, just kind of like when things go wrong. I'm not going to read through all of these, but just a great list. And yeah, just the idea that, of course, Kubernetes is rapidly being updated. It has a very active open source community, and it's an awesome thing that there's so much going into it. But then, like, there does seem to be this theme of managed Kubernetes that kind of makes updates easier for you, as opposed to you managing your own Kubernetes and having to stay on top of the updates and make sure that those make it smoothly into your system. Like, there's clearly a very different level of experience there.
yeah.
So that's it. Those are some of the themes that I pulled out, and just some questions that I had at the end was just kind of like, this was fun. I mean, like, it was a Hacker News thread. I mean, you know, very, very public, very opinionated. But I think it's fun to kind of see what people are saying about Kubernetes, kind of like a little bit out in the wild. This is maybe like an input, like a user input, and how do we process things like these? And the other one was just kind of like, in Kubernetes, like, do we have kind of like an agreed upon definition of what a good experience on Kubernetes is? And that's it.
Yeah, I think those are great questions. A lot of times what could be interesting, so the thing is, the thing to kind of unravel here is that Kubernetes upstream is an open source community. So in a lot of ways, when people say, hey, like, I want an easy onboarding experience, I want like an easier kick the tires experience, unless there's a contributor who's ready to kind of jump in and do that work, then kind of the way to crystallize this into action is to try and understand the concrete kind of broken stairs as they're going up the adoption process, and try to feed those in as issues on the relevant upstream projects, but somebody has to come and build them. So it can kind of be a partnership in some ways, like if these people are actually interested in improving the project versus if they're not, then that's kind of how you end up with a super user optimized experience, which is really what we have today, is because the people building Kubernetes are the super users and creators of Kubernetes. So you end up kind of with this, you know, it's not an easy on-ramp, but then who's going to concretely do the work to build the steps. So I think that in some ways the usability group can become a place where we gather feedback like this and try to get very concrete about, as I look at the new experience for a new user, you know, what's missing. And in some ways, you know, we can feed things into docs because we have a really active SIG docs, and also direct people to add to docs or suggest topics for docs that would have helped them if they had existed while they were trying to kind of go along this user journey. So I think those are some things we can do. And then when we get really crisp on, okay, we kind of understand what's missing here, then we can also start to invite people to submit code changes both to docs and to individual projects that we've already kind of, because the problem is as a new contributor, a lot of times people come in, say, okay, I figured this out, you know, I'm going to fix this broken stair, but they don't have the context in the project enough to perhaps like contribute the right thing that's actually going to get accepted. So that becomes a bad experience as a new contributor. So that's why I'm kind of saying like we should help kind of curate these issues with the team that's involved, and then we could start inviting new contributors to help fix them, or just socialize them with more senior contributors if they're more complicated issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great insight for sure.
Cool.
Oh.
Thank you for sharing. It was really interesting. Like it's fascinating because at the company I work at, not everyone is entirely sold on Kubernetes yet. So they're like, what's the benefit? So it's like really nice also to see what people are saying in terms of like when it works well, what works well about it, and then like where are the drawbacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for putting that together. I know I read that article and all I pretty much read the entire thread. It's super interesting. And like being at a company that's very bought in to Kubernetes, but is, you know, made up of like pretty much super users, I find myself having to really bring the perspective of, you know, most people don't actually care about Kubernetes. They're just trying to get a job done with it. Like they don't really care about the platform. It's just helping them achieve a goal of some kind. So this kind of perspective of like, you know, a little more removed from the love of Kubernetes, but more just like I need to get something done. This thread was super useful. It gave me a lot of perspective, and I thought you did a good job organizing those into some big themes.
Yeah, you know, for like user research minded people, it's kind of like you see the thread and it's like, this is awesome.
Is this something that you would share with us to look at, or is it more just like to review on the recording? I'm not really sure how that works.
It's on my local right now, but happy to share if y'all want. I can just transfer it to like Google Slides or something like that.
Yeah, that would be sweet if that's all right with you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. Josie, did you want to go next?
Sure. So I don't have a presentation. This is more a general inquiry. So I was wondering if there's any documentation around tagging and labeling PR requests and issues in GitHub. I found a couple of docs. Like I can send you the links for what I found so far. But I'm specifically looking on guidance for tagging usability issues.
Oh,
or
cool.
labeling.
Yeah, you know, probably the right place for us to figure out what the exact labeling that already exists is to just go to SIG contributor experience. and just ask them, because I know it's written up. I would just have to dig through GitHub to find it. And then once we found it, if I don't know if they have a usability tag. They may have a usability tag, but it would be really cool for us to pull up a report and see everything that has been tagged, or start socializing this idea that we could start tagging things and maybe even make a dashboard.
Yeah. So I was thinking of maybe this being like a possible track of work to kind of look at what's being tagged, do a little bit of analysis, and then see if we can create more labels and tags.
Yeah.
And that might help us like triage what the community is interested in.
Yeah.
It would also like, it could possibly help our visibility too if we came out with a set of guidelines and said, hey, we do have folks looking at this. So yeah, I just want to know your thoughts, and if someone was willing to maybe like work on this with me.
Yeah, I'm super happy to help you figure it out. We actually are presenting to contributor experience on Thursday. I think Valerie was going to take that, but I'll have to check in with her since she has a lot going on right now. But that would be a good place for us to socialize this. And before then, we could just hop into the contributor experience Slack channel and ask them about, tagging issues and like usability tags. And they're so good at writing things up that I know that there's just a GitHub page somewhere that like has everything, but we could also just work with them to add anything that we wanted to add. And then also kind of open it up for discussion as far as like what other labels would people like to see and how can we track it? Because you're right, usability is like a huge umbrella, which is why we ended up spinning it up as an entirely new SIG. And we have different pieces like the translation work. Some people are very passionate about improving the usability of people engaging in translation work. And then we have like UX, we have like, how do we have like a consistent visual language, right? Like, so there's like a bunch of different, and then there's new user experience. So like, there's just a bunch of new pieces. And I don't think that programmatically, we have a great way of getting visibility over what everyone else is working on and what they'd like us to take a look at. So yeah. Cool.
So I think like my action items are for us to connect after this, and then we can send out a message on Slack to the contributors, and then I can book some time with you before Thursday to just like put some stuff together.
Yeah, let's check in with Valerie and see if she's going to do the presentation, and if she's not, we can I should probably pull something together. So yeah, we will figure out the update and either have Valerie kind of socialize that we're doing this, or we can jump in and help out. So yeah. Yep. Cool. Okay. Were there any other topics people wanted to talk about today? Okay. Well, Gabby and I will work with Igor on getting access to the data that we've been gathering for our usability survey, and then do an update about that at our next meeting, since neither of us have access to the CNCF Survey Monkey. Yeah.
One last thing. Sorry, my dog just went off in the background. I would love to help out with the data analysis or visualization. I think I mentioned that before. I don't know if that's been decided already, but I just wanted to say that I would love to do that in R, and like we could put the code up to be used again, and make sure we like get all the branding stuff right to be reusable and fit nicely into the way we want to distribute it in the future.
Okay, yeah, that sounds rad. Let's see. What is, if you just Slack me your email address, I'll loop you in to what Gabby and I are doing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks everybody, and chat with you next time. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.